Welcome to the Team Teach podcast. I'm Clare, and in each episode you'll find me talking with an expert guest to learn more about behaviour. We squeeze a lot into each episode. You'll listen to the latest thinking in behaviour, continue your professional development with our book recommendation, and then I'll send you away with 3 practical tips you can use in your setting. I'm joined today by Murray Hodge-Neill. Murray is a teaching professional in Canberra, Australia. He is an accredited Team Teach trainer and currently manages Team Teach training for all 93 schools in the ACT Education Directorate. And today, Murray and I are talking about restorative conversations. And this is part 2 of a 2-part episode series. Be sure to listen in to part 1 before you listen to this episode. Enjoy. I know one thing I battle with a little bit as a practitioner. I mean, I work therapeutically now one-to-one, so this is me observing schools more so rather than being in as a classroom teacher. But one thing that I notice in restorative schools is that even though it might be culturally in there, there's still a want from some people, perhaps from more a behaviourist background, that it's like, sure, we're doing the restorative, but what about the perhaps schools don't use punishment now. It might be consequence here.
Yeah.
Perhaps
punishment by a different name. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds nicer, but yeah, it's the same thing. But I'm just wondering about that because I know maybe the answer is around culture embedding, but there is a real clump of people and society to an extent is behaviourists. Like you do this, you go to prison. I'm just wondering, I'm sure that comes up in questions you have.
Yeah, and pretty much every adult in Western society was raised through a behaviourist lens as well. Yeah. So I mean that's the the fish doesn't notice the water. Because it's just part of their environment. So and any change in a school, and it's part of theory of change for leaders, not only in schools but any organisation, is you've got a percentage that will be your pioneers, a percentage will be early adopters, then there's the majority, and then there'll always be a percentage of people who are resistant to the change. Some of the literature around transforming schools in a restorative way isn't happy to just leave it at that. So some of that leadership literature, it almost sort of says you just have to live with it. You're going to have a percentage of people who are going to resist it, and you just have to drag them along with you. The literature in restorative circles kind of takes a slightly different approach to that. It says you can actually be restorative in how you address that, because people don't resist change just because they want to resist change. They have reasons, and what can be really important is to sit down and authentically listen to those people and what their concerns are about the change. They still might not be fully on board. At least you've given them a voice. You've empowered them to be able to speak into what's happening. And if you again authentically reflect on that, you might see that there are some changes in the way that you're implementing. You might be able to tweak your implementation, change your strategy a little bit to accommodate some of the concerns of those people. Yeah, it's a far more relational and compassionate and empathetic way of approaching change.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that, because those people, like you said, that metaphor of a fish not noticing the water because you're just in it. That is often how people are brought up, and people working in schools bring lived experience and kind of what they knew from school potentially. And so, just to be kind of heard with the concerns around it. But I always think with restorative practices, restorative justice, like the evidence is extremely strong for it. But I think some of the difficulties that schools face is exactly what you've said, that the implementation is actually, if you sort of read the books that you're going to suggest cover to cover, the implementation would take the two practical activities, and then that'd be like, cool, we've done it, and sort
Yeah.
of miss the fact that this could be like, I mean, you'll know better the year's process, but to implement sort of strategic change, sort of 3-4 years, and then it's sort of, it takes time to get it bed in.
Yeah, and also, if you've got, and depending on, again, primary school, high school, they can
Sure.
be really, really different as well. But if you're, say you're in a high school and you've got people have had between 12 and 17 or 18 years of experiencing behaviourist approaches, that's going to take a lot of time for them
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
accustomed to. By the time you've got the next generation, if you like, of students coming through, then they're actually coming into a school culture that's been,
Yeah.
where that approach is embedded. It's part of the DNA of the school culture. So, and any change in a school,
Yeah.
it can take that. It can actually take a cycling through of the students who were there when you implemented the change, for the next sort of lot of students to come through before it really takes effect.
Yeah, and I'm liking it back to something you said, like towards the beginning, about effective restorative practices. It's about the preparation, and actually
Mhm.
the change in culture. You can kind of have those bits, and you could label that as that's your preparation for it kind of to cycle over into a different system, and
Yep.
that bit takes a lot of work and time.
Yeah, definitely, and patience.
And a lot of
Yeah,
patience. Yeah,
yeah,
I think.
and one of the things, when people are accustomed to a behaviourist approach, often what they'll ask is, well, what's the consequence?
Mm,
And you mentioned consequence before. Often what they mean by that, maybe not always, but often what they mean by that is what penalty will that person have
yeah.
because of what they did? And my response to that would be, um, what's important to you? Is it important that someone suffers because of what they did, or is it important that it doesn't happen again? So if you want to bring some effective change, so that not only that person is less likely to do it again,
Mm,
but other people are less likely to do it again, then there are better ways than rewards and punishments.
yeah.
Yep. Because even in societies that have very strong punitive approaches to crime still exists.
Mm,
Yep. So that harsh punitive approaches, they don't work.
mm.
Yeah. There are better ways, and um, if if I can show you a way that reduces the likelihood of happening again, yeah,
It,
is that your
you're,
preference? Yeah,
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 you're always going to go for that one. I mean,
yeah,
it's such a overused metaphor about that. If you've got, people falling into the water, you don't want to just keep fishing them out. You want to figure
yep,
out like why that's happening. And it's kind of, the same idea here is that harsher consequences for me in schools might mean that we have higher exclusion rates, less engagement, and perhaps your behaviour may improve, but then actually you're not actually helping those that need different approaches and need different things. You're just sort of, yeah, you know it's not inclusive, and I feel quite strongly about it. But I think what I'm kind of, it's not struggling with this topic, is that it's such a shift for some, I would say high schools and primary schools here,
yep,
probably it is such a shift, and that time poor bit makes it such a challenge to authentically work through this kind of system. And it's it's always that age old thing in schools. It's like you have to invest the time to get the
yes,
results, and then the
yeah,
shortcuts make it seem like it's not working, and then you just kind of go through this cyclical thing.
yeah, and it's a high investment of time
Yeah.
to get started and to start to embed it. The payoff comes later.
Yeah.
Yep. So when that culture has changed and it's starting to have an impact, that comes later. It's not
Mm,
an immediate sugar fix. yeah, it's a matter of persisting and living with the challenge of that initial
Hmm.
implementation.
Um, we're almost actually out of time, but I'm just going to ask like a personal interest
Yeah.
question now. But do you believe that a kind of behaviourist and consequence system can coexist with the restorative system?
Reality says that if someone is absolutely opposed to engaging in a restorative process, as I
Hmm.
said, if you force them to or coerce them to, then it's not restorative
Mm,
anyway. You, you probably do need an alternative, and
mm,
and and maybe that is the alternative. What I would say, in addition to that, is that if you do need to take something that's more of a behaviourist approach, you can still you can still approach it um, with your own mindset is one of restoration. So still
hmm.
prioritizing things like relationship, the value of each individual, listening with empathy, all of those things, and empowering the person. So
Yeah.
they might not be wanting to engage in a restorative process as such, but I can still take a restorative approach to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I use that quite a bit in services that I've worked in, certainly, where I do have young people that actually a restorative process would not necessarily be ideal for because they would be unable to see that
Hmm.
hitting someone is wrong. I think not on a cognitive level, but to actually take responsibility that I've done something wrong, like the
Yep,
shame, and that there's no blame from me, for that. It is like this huge
yep,
amount of shame and not being able to process and cope with the shame. So we, in some services that I've worked in, don't want to leave with this idea that the child is right, that it's okay
mm,
to hit. So there is some sort of alternative, like you've talked about, but that is done in a restorative way. That the alternative might be some time with an adult doing something that would be
yep,
a consequence, but then within that, there's that lean in to relational approaches, still trying to have that restorative kind of conversation, but just doing it in a roundabout way,
yep,
very gently. And so we try
mm,
and get the person to the point, maybe it takes a year, maybe 2 years to actually have the conversation in a more direct way. That's kind of how we approach it in services that I've worked in.
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned shame there, Claire. So some of the theoretical
Mm,
foundation of a restorative approach. So why do restorative approaches work? And a lot of people have looked into affect script psychology,
mm.
which is some amazing. And if we do get some book recommendations,
Oh
I have
yeah.
a book recommendation on exactly that. But a key to that is understanding that shame is absolutely a huge factor when something has gone wrong. But part of the magic of a restorative process
Hmm.
is in turning individual shame into collective shame and shared shame.
Yeah.
So where shame is destructive is when I hang on to it
Yeah.
and I keep it to myself.
Hmm.
Whereas if I can overcome that and with support allow someone to share that with me, and
Hmm.
that's where that conversation, that's where hearing the impact that something had on another person, and then also them hearing, if I'm a person who's caused harm, them hearing what was going on for me at the time, then that can bring that shame into that shared space, which
Mm.
can be incredibly powerful in healing relationships.
Yeah, I'm book recommendation. I'm like, yep, that's
Yeah.
like I want to read it. But I mean that leads us nicely on. Yeah, if we could do a couple of your book recommendations, then the three top tips, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm already mentioned. I'm gonna hold them up so you can see
Nice.
them. So The one I mentioned, it's
Yeah.
co-authored by Vernon Kelly and Mark Forsborn.
Yeah.
Mark Forsborn's a name that you'll hear a lot if you talk to me about restorative processes. So that's all about, it's called The Psychology of Emotion in Restorative Practice. So that's all about affect script psychology and how it impacts on restorative processes. Another book that Mark Forsborn co-wrote with Joe Brummer is Becoming a Trauma-Informed Restorative Teacher or
Yeah.
Educator. Trauma-informed restorative educator, and
Mhm.
so that's very much tying good trauma-informed practice
Mhm.
into restorative processes. So that's a real good one. And then if anyone's really interested in going down that path of really developing those skills around facilitating restorative conferences, David Moore and Aliki Vernon, they're in Victoria in Australia. They have a book called Setting Relations Right in Restorative Practice. And that gives a lot of the theoretical background as well, but also some really good practical guidance in facilitating restorative conferences.
Yeah.
So that'd be my top books. It took me quite a while, Claire, to look through my bookcase behind me and whittle it down to 3. There's also there's a series of books that they're the little book series. So there's a little book on
Yeah.
restorative practice, little book on circle processes, little book on restorative teaching tools. They're all really good practical
Yeah.
tools as well.
Oh, they're super helpful, and we'll have some links to those at the bottom of the show notes.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering about 3 top tips.
3 top tips, and again, because I'm an avid listener of the podcast,
You're
I
prepped.
knew you were going there. I think the top tip from my perspective would be that a restorative disposition is more important than specific practices.
Yeah.
So particularly at that universal level. So what we're putting together in our supports for schools here in the ACT is an understanding that there is a continuum from those more universal to more sort of high end, more formal restorative conferences.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it becomes more prescriptive. It's not absolutely prescriptive, but it becomes more prescriptive the more complex it is. But and in that universal space, what we would be wanting all school staff to be doing, it's not prescriptive. It's not here's a finite set of tools. It's here are some principles,
Yeah.
and if you embody those principles, then you're being restorative. Yep. So sitting in a circle and passing a talking stick and asking 5 questions on a lanyard, that doesn't mean you've been restorative.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. So so that's the top one. Restorative disposition more important than specific practices. And another top tip, really important, because this is where additional harm has sometimes occurred. Don't attempt restorative facilitation beyond your training skill and experience. There's lots of support and lots of help. There are lots of people around that can help guide you if you're feeling like something's a little bit out of your depth. Do get out there and give it a go. But if there's something that's complex, that significant harm has occurred, get some help. Get someone to help you with that. We are recognizing that that sometimes the complexity of things that happen in schools are beyond what will be what you could reasonably ask schools to be skilled and trained in managing and facilitating. So don't attempt something that's beyond your skill, training, and experience. Third one, and it ties into that first one as well. Start with having a restorative mindset in your personal and your professional relationships. So there's that concept of starting in the center and then rippling outwards, and that's really what we want to be. So embody it first, and then in all of your interactions, that's going to influence all of your interactions, and then that then influences the people that you interact with for those ever expanding circles.
Yeah, the butterfly effect.
Yeah,
We start small and it kind of flutters out. That's so helpful, Murray, and I've genuinely really enjoyed hearing more about this. And my real like takeaway is actually that bit that you said at the start about that preparation phase. And I think that's such a good reminder for everyone that it's not the end product. There's a process, and the preparation is a big part of it. So yeah, really great stuff. And I hope to catch up with you soon, Murray.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's been fun.
You've been listening to the Team Teach podcast. It's been great to have you here with us as we discuss behaviour, communication, and the ways we can best support those in our care. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.